Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about something that may be viewed as controversial depending on the gun group and the types of gun guys that you actually shoot and hang with. It's the Black Hawk brand Serpa CQC holster. This is an active retention holster, meaning that you actually have to do something to release the retention in order to retrieve the firearm from the holster. Case in point being that you would have, for a passive holster, you would simply have some felt retention inside the holster itself, but no mechanism, no mechanical release, so to speak, that would allow you to retrieve that firearm. You simply give it a little bit more of a tug on a passive retention holster and it comes out. Where again, on the Serpa, it's active. You actually have to activate something. You have to activate the switch that allows the pistol to be retrieved from the holster. Now, understanding the purpose of this particular holster is to probably better understand why it was even made in the first place. It's a really good holster for people who require that active retention, like military or law enforcement. One of the benefits of this style of holster, obviously, is the fact that, number one, your pistol is not going to bounce out. And by the way, guys, for the sake of safety, I'm using an airsoft gun today. I have taken my Glock 19 out of commission today. This is a holster that it would fit in, and I've used this 19X airsoft gun in exchange for my live fire. Let's say you're running with this thing. Well, it's not going to come out. You have to activate and disable that retention mechanism in order to pull this out. And another thing I want to say real quick, with this thing being a brand new holster, guys, it is tight. Even whenever I activate the button to release the retention, there's some passive retention that the holster itself has where it is gripping the frame. In other words, before the trigger guard even goes into the locking mechanism, it's pretty tight. Like if I hold the locking mechanism button down, you notice how much effort still goes into pushing this pistol in and removing it. Again, I'm holding this retention button down, so there's nothing actively holding the trigger guard in place. And there's still some effort to get it out. So therein lies another danger. The average guy like myself who would be walking through Walmart sees the Black Hawk Serpa and figures, cool holster for me, it's brand new, it's sticky. So now he's got an added layer of potential danger because now he's got to fight to get that out. And we'll go into more of that later. But what happens is you're expected to press this button right here to release your tension. It's a great concept because if you're fighting for your gun with somebody else, again, we're speaking in terms of law enforcement, or running after somebody if you're chasing a perp, well, you don't want your gun flying out. And again, if you're fighting for it, you certainly don't want the guy having access to it. However, this is not a one size fits all. And I'm not asking Black Hawk to make different size guns for everybody. I don't have abnormally large hands, but my fingers are long. What happens in terms of me using this particular holster, and this is 100% user. This is not a design flaw. I am not bashing Black Hawk. Black Hawk had to design this thing to fit average size people. Well, apparently my hands are a little bit larger than average because whenever I go to index this button and press it, if I'm getting that deep hard grip or a deep hard hold, a tactical hold onto my pistol to where when I withdraw it, I'm not having to reposition my grip in order to fire it. If I'm getting in position on the back of that thing, high up on that beaver tail, then what it's doing is it's putting my finger much farther down than where that button is. The button is actually right in this area right here that I need to press. Look at where the tip of my finger is. I'm a good half inch to probably 5/8 of an inch farther beyond that. So what I can do in a static, completely safe position like I am right now is I can bend my finger or push my finger at the knuckle, using this part of the knuckle right here. I can push that in there, and yeah, I can activate that retention and pull it out of there. And you notice it's still not easy. It doesn't feel natural, but I can do that. I can still extend that trigger finger as far down as I can and still activate it again with that knuckle. What comes more natural when you pass a button up isn't to use that knuckle right there. It's to bend that finger and now make that finger, the pad of your finger, now reach the button to where your natural position in pressing a button is not going to be here in most cases. It's usually with the tip of your finger. So naturally, most of us are going to want to condition ourselves, even if it's some kind of a subconscious effort, to now bend that finger. When you bend that finger, you will notice that whenever I do activate that button and withdraw, I've released its retention and I'm pulling it out. If I'm doing a fast enough draw, I don't have time to straighten my finger back out again. My finger is still curved. Look where it is. It winds up a hair away from where that trigger is, in a very unsafe position. This is a position that I do not want my trigger finger in, especially in a high stress situation. I want to throw that out there real quick because we have to remind ourselves, when I need to use this thing, actually not this one, the airsoft one, but my actual firearm, I'm not pulling this thing, and I'm certainly not pulling that trigger unless I'm defending myself or my family and I'm intending to shoot an attacker or some sort of threat. If I am pulling this thing out, that level of adrenaline that's flowing through my body at that point is not only giving me tunnel vision up here and clouding my mind, but it's also making my fine motor skills kind of garbage. You know what I mean? It's making me a little bit clumsy. It's making me a lot less efficient than I normally would be out here shooting in this type of situation. So I'm not going to be near as effective at going, okay, Paul, you can use the tip of your finger, but let's make sure we make a conscious effort to extend that trigger finger back out again until we're ready to actually get on that trigger and pull it. That's something that I don't trust myself to be able to do. Now, I know what some of you guys are thinking, the guys that love these holsters, you need to train more with it. I agree. You definitely need to train more with it. And you know what? Maybe muscle memory will take over. But remember, these holsters, in many cases, are sold in your Walmarts, your academies. They're low price. There's a lot of them out there. You're gonna tell me that the average guy buying one of these, snatching it off that shelf at Walmart, is going to put the trigger time in to develop that muscle memory and to get to where he's using this thing more safe if he has longer fingers like me? And it's not just long fingered, people. I don't want you to think that at all. It still can be a habit, obviously, to bend your finger back and want to press a button incorrectly other than the way Black Hawk expects you to press it on here. Again, it's a training issue. But not only are we talking about average Joes out there looking for a bargain basement holster that they can afford. And look, I'm not dogging the guys who can only afford one of these. Look, we all have our level of what we can afford and what, how much we're willing to invest in a particular product. My thinking is I'd rather do without a couple of other vices and a couple of other things. Maybe I don't get a 12-pack of beer this weekend. You know what I mean? I mean, seriously, you can use some situational thinking like that and actually say, this is probably not the best holster for me. Maybe I'm going to do this instead. Getting yourself a safer holster and being able to finally afford that next level holster that might not have the problems that this one does. My point is, not only are you dealing with average Joes out there who don't have that real high level of training and probably can't afford multiple rounds. Maybe they don't have an airsoft gun like I do where they can do that trigger time training. So you're talking about unskilled, untrained people using it. And let me point this out. Remember I said that this thing was mostly intended for law enforcement and military in many cases because they need that active retention? If you don't already know this little nugget of information, you and I have way more training than most. And I'm talking about ongoing training too, not just preliminary, ongoing. We have more training than most law enforcement officers out there. I'm talking about the majority of law enforcement. You and I have way more training than them. So we are entrusting a man to carry a loaded firearm, cocked and locked and ready to roll on his hip on a daily basis for his job every single day that has minimum training. We're talking about guys that qualify or requalify with their pistols maybe twice a year. Now, I'm not talking about our SWAT friends out there. Look, these guys are proficient and have way more training and a much higher skill level than you and I will ever have without the type of training that they have. We're talking about the average guy, that average police officer out there that, again, touches his weapon twice a year. That touches his weapon only when he's told it's time to touch your weapon. Those are the people that we're trusting to operate this right. Do you honestly think when they go out to that range twice a year to qualify with their firearms, that they're also receiving holster training? I doubt it. I'm sure all they're doing is inserting their firearm, or actually it's already in there, simply pressing the button, and it's probably just as sticky as this because they don't draw it very often, and pointing it and slowly shooting at a target, a static target, to requalify with their firearm. That does not give me a high level of confidence. Now, with that being said, training and negligence are definitely parts that play into a lot of this. And you know why I say that? There's a lot of these Serpa holsters out there. There are some people who are accidentally shooting themselves, but not a ton of them. So obviously, it's a matter of how you use the holster. If this holster was just a flat out defective holster, people would be shooting themselves every day with it negligently. Now, I say negligently because people want to say accidentally. If I am depressing this button like this and I go to pull it out and I shoot like this and I accidentally pull that trigger, that's negligence on my part. I operated the holster incorrectly. I did something wrong. It was not the holster's fault. It was not Black Hawk's fault. I used it the way it was not intended to use. So I want to make sure I make that very clear. I'm not giving people excuses out there to incorrectly have negligent discharges or to utilize this holster in the improper way. I'm just telling you out there that that problem exists out there. There's a lot of untrained people out there. And again, I'm not bashing those people. Not everybody has the time or the means to train on a regular basis and get proficient with the way Black Hawk intends us to utilize this holster. My point is, knowing how many people are out there that don't have that skill level or that level of training, in my opinion, you would serve yourself a whole lot better simply getting a holster that has passive retention. Adjust your retention down here if you want a little more retention. That's not going to allow this thing to come out. I mean, already this is my standard holster that I use, and my gun won't pop out if I run with it. Now, if I'm fighting somebody with it, it's a different story. Somebody else could grab it and simply deploy it like that. Thing is, I don't see myself in that kind of position because that's not what I do for a living. Guys, it's very important that we look at holsters like this and we make the right decision. Is this a holster for me? If there are any knocks against it, and those knocks involve training, then maybe you lean towards another one. And again, like I said earlier, maybe you condition yourself to say, you know what, I'm willing for the sake of my family and myself to not buy the wrong holster to house something that can really damage me.